I didn't know my life could crack open in front of half my family and still somehow end with me being labeled too sensitive. My name is Catherine. I'm 32, an ER nurse in Portland, and I thought I knew exactly where my life was headed. 5 years with the same man, 3 years living together, comfortable, predictable, safe, or at least that's what I told myself every time something felt slightly off. It happened at my younger brother Ethan's wedding, a 3-day celebration at a vineyard in the Willamette Valley, warm lights strung between oak trees, long wooden tables, champagne flutes clinking like promises, the kind of place where love is supposed to feel undeniable. My boyfriend Lucas loved events like that. He thrived on them. Attention, conversations, admiration. He wore those things like a tailored suit. I should have noticed how carefully he dressed that night, how he kept adjusting his cufflinks, how his energy sharpened the moment we arrived. And then he met Nora, my college best friend, Ethan's best woman, a successful tech entrepreneur I'd known for over a decade, confident, polished, the kind of person Lucas always said he wanted to be around more. I watched them talk, laugh, lean in too close. I told myself not to be dramatic. This was just Lucas being charming. This was just me being tired from a long shift, right? Until I heard it. I wish I'd met someone like you first, instead of Catherine. He said it casually, softly, like it was nothing, like I wasn't standing 10 feet away, like my mother wasn't within earshot, like my relationship wasn't collapsing in real time under vineyard lights and polite smiles. When I confronted him, Lucas laughed. Relax, he said. It's just a compliment. God, why are you always so sensitive? People stared. Conversations died mid-sentence. Nora froze, mortified, and then disappeared. My aunts exchanged looks. My mother didn't look angry. She looked heartbroken. And Lucas? He rolled his eyes, loud enough for everyone to hear. You're making this awkward for everyone. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not exploded, not screamed, cracked. Because this wasn't about champagne, or flirting, or even Nora. This was about how he saw me. And how, deep down, he always had. Before that night, before the vineyard lights and the champagne and the quiet humiliation, my life looked solid from the outside. I'm Catherine, 32, born and raised in Oregon. I've been an ER nurse for almost a decade. It's not glamorous. There are no sleek offices or LinkedIn headlines. There are blood-soaked scrubs at 3 a.m, the smell of antiseptic clinging to my hair, hands shaking as I chart after losing a patient I tried everything to save. It's messy, loud, emotionally brutal work, but it's honest. It matters. And for most of my adult life, I was proud of it. I met Lucas when I was 27 at a friend's birthday party downtown. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, sharp suit, confident smile, the kind of man who could talk to anyone and make them feel temporarily fascinating. He flirted effortlessly, but when he focused on me, it felt intentional. Chosen. Our early years were good, easy even. He loved how grounded I was. I loved how ambitious he seemed. We moved in together after 2 years, a small apartment with big windows, and the promise of someday floating gently between us. 5 years together. 3 years sharing bills, routines, mornings. But somewhere along the way, comfort turned into something more transactional. Lucas made good money, and he never let me forget it. Not outright, not cruelly, at least not at first. It was always framed as jokes. Must be nice to clock out whenever, he'd say, even though my shifts often ran 12 to 14 hours. You should really think about pivoting careers, he'd add casually. Something cleaner, more impressive. I told myself he didn't mean it that way. He was stressed. Sales pressure, quotas, corporate culture, everyone vents. When he introduced me to his work friends, there was always this subtle pause, this tiny breath, before he said what I did, like he was bracing for a reaction. This is Catherine, he'd say. She's an ER nurse. Not proudly, more like an explanation. I noticed it, but I swallowed it. Love requires patience, I told myself. Compromise, understanding. My family adored him at first. My mother thought his confidence balanced my quiet nature. Ethan saw him as cool, someone worldly and driven. Lucas knew how to charm parents. Compliments, handshakes, eye contact held just long enough. But there were signs, small ones. The way he lit up around people who could do something for him. The way he talked about networking like it was a moral virtue. The way he compared me, never directly, never cruelly, to women who had options. I ignored it because we had history. Because 5 years felt like an investment I couldn't just walk away from. Because he never cheated, never yelled, never hit. Because I didn't know yet that neglect can be just as damaging as betrayal. When Ethan announced his wedding, Lucas was thrilled. 3 days surrounded by successful strangers, beautiful scenery, opportunities to shine. I told myself I was imagining the edge in his excitement. I told myself a lot of things back then. And standing at that vineyard, watching him laugh too hard with Nora, watching my own reflection fade out of his attention, I realized something terrifying. The discomfort I felt that night wasn't new. It was just finally impossible to ignore. Looking back now, the signs didn't start at the vineyard. They had been threading themselves quietly through our life for years, subtle enough to dismiss, sharp enough to wound if I let myself feel them. Lucas changed first in small, almost reasonable ways. He started coming home later, claiming work dinners, client drinks, networking events that always seemed more important than whatever plans we had. When I mentioned feeling disconnected, he'd kiss my forehead distractedly and say, "This is just a busy season, Catherine. You know how it is." As if my 12-hour ER shifts somehow didn't count as busy. Then there were the comments, always wrapped in humor, always deniable. "You're so good at what you do," he'd say, swirling wine in his glass. "I just wish you had more ambition outside the hospital." Or, "Don't take this the wrong way, but you could really benefit from being around more high-achieving people." High-achieving, as if saving lives was a hobby. I started noticing how he behaved around other people, especially women who fit a very specific mold. Polished, corporate, connected. He leaned forward when they spoke, laughed a little louder, asked questions he never asked me anymore. About goals, about futures, about potential. Around me he talked logistics, rent, groceries, schedules. The romance thinned quietly, like fabric worn soft by too many washes. At family gatherings, he performed. With my parents, my cousins, my aunts. He was attentive, affectionate, charming. But in private, he'd sigh if I reached for his hand at the table. "Relax," he'd whisper. "You're always so intense." The first time that word stung, intense, I told myself I was being sensitive. The second time, I started paying attention. When Ethan announced his wedding, Lucas immediately asked who would be attending, who the groomsmen were, what kind of venue it was. When I mentioned Nora, my college roommate, Ethan's best woman, his eyebrows lifted just a little. "She doing well for herself?" he asked. I laughed it off. "She's always done well." From that moment, something shifted. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, Lucas obsessed over his appearance. New suits, new watch, even a new haircut that took him 3 tries to get just right. Meanwhile, he barely noticed when I came home shaking after a pediatric code that didn't end well. At the rehearsal dinner, it all came together too cleanly to ignore. The way Lucas's posture changed when Nora spoke. The way he asked about her startup, her investors, her travel schedule. The way his hand lingered when he laughed at her jokes. Nothing overt. Nothing anyone could accuse him of. Except I could feel it. It was the way his attention abandoned me without apology. I tried to ground myself. "This is my insecurity talking," I told myself. "You're tired. You're surrounded by people. He's just social." But every time I caught his eye, he looked past me. When I finally went looking for him during the reception, hoping for a dance, hoping for reassurance, I wasn't prepared for what I'd overhear. The words themselves were bad enough. What made them devastating was how easily they came out of his mouth, as if he'd been thinking them for a long time. And in that moment, before the laughter, before the eye rolls, before being told I was the problem, I understood something painful and clarifying. This wasn't the beginning of the betrayal. It was simply the first time he said it out loud. I remember the exact moment my body reacted, before my mind caught up. My stomach dropped first, like I'd missed a step on a staircase that wasn't there. My hands went cold. The noise of the reception, laughter, clinking glasses, music drifting from the speakers, blurred into a dull hum, like I was underwater. "I wish I'd met someone like you first, instead of Catherine." Lucas's voice wasn't slurred, it wasn't loud, it was intimate, certain, said with the kind of ease that comes from truth, not impulse. Nora froze. Her champagne glass hovered halfway to her lips, her eyes darting in my direction as she realized I was close enough to hear, close enough to be hurt. I took a breath, then another. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I stepped forward. Lucas turned, saw me, and for half a second, just half, something like alarm flickered across his face. Then it vanished. replaced by a laugh so casual it made my chest ache. "Oh my God," he said, shaking his head. "Relax." The word landed like a slap. "It's just a compliment," he continued, loud enough now that a few nearby guests looked over. "Why are you always so sensitive?" I could feel eyes on me. My cousin Sarah stood a few feet away, her smile frozen. Two of my aunts had gone quiet mid-conversation. My mother, seated at a nearby table, had turned fully toward us, her face pale. I looked at Lucas, really looked at him. His arms were crossed, his posture defensive, not apologetic, not concerned, annoyed. "I didn't mean it like that," he said, rolling his eyes. "You're making this awkward for everyone." Nora set her glass down quickly. I should go find Ethan," she muttered, already stepping back. Her face was flushed with embarrassment, not desire, not excitement, shame. She left without looking at either of us again. Silence filled the space she vacated. Heavy. Public. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand an explanation, but something inside me went still instead. I lowered my voice. "You said you wished you'd met her instead of me." Lucas laughed again, sharper this time. "Jesus, Catherine, don't twist my words. It was champagne talk. Everyone knows I say stupid stuff when I drink." I glanced at my mother. Her eyes met mine. Hurt, yes, but also something else. Recognition. She had heard it. So had half the room. I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I didn't rush. I walked because I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. As I passed my mom's table, she reached out like she wanted to stop me, then hesitated. I gave her a small nod, hoping she understood that I needed space more than comfort. That night in the hotel room, the silence between us was worse than the public scene. Lucas tossed his jacket onto the chair and sighed dramatically. "You really overreacted back there." I sat on the edge of the bed, my heels still on, my feet aching. "You humiliated me," he scoffed. "I complimented someone. That's it. You said you wished you'd met her instead of me." "You know how I get after a few drinks," he replied, waving his hand. "Why are you acting like this is some huge betrayal?" I looked up at him. "No, I know how you get when you think people are watching." That stopped him. For a moment, his expression hardened. Then he shrugged. "You're jealous, insecure. That's not my fault." What broke me wasn't the accusation. It was the absence of remorse. He wasn't sorry, not even a little. He wasn't trying to understand why I was hurt. He was irritated that I dared to be. I stood. "You can stay for the rest of the weekend if you want," I said evenly. "But we're done after that." He stared at me, then laughed. Actually laughed. "You're being dramatic. You'll get over this by morning." I didn't respond. I packed a bag, my hands steady despite the storm inside my chest, and left. As I drove through the dark toward my parents' guest house, one thought repeated itself over and over. This wasn't about champagne. This was about how he saw me. And maybe how he always had. The house was dark when I arrived at my parents' place. I let myself into the guest house quietly, like I was afraid my own grief might wake someone. I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, suitcase still zipped, and stared at my hands until the trembling finally stopped. Shock is a strange thing. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with silence. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream into a pillow or throw anything. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. Not just the words Lucas said, but the way he said them. The confidence, the ease, the way he laughed when I told him I was done. By morning, my phone was full of messages. "Lucas, of course. You're blowing this out of proportion. Can we talk like adults? Don't ruin Ethan's weekend." Then my mom. "I'm proud of you. Come by after brunch if you want." That message undid me. At the vineyard brunch, Lucas acted like nothing had happened. He was already dressed, hair styled, laughing with other guests, posing for photos like a man whose life hadn't just imploded in public. I sat at a corner table, nursing coffee that tasted like ash. Every time I looked at him, something inside me twisted. Not jealousy, not even anger. Disbelief. My mom sat beside me, her voice low. "You handled that with more dignity than most people would have." I swallowed. I thought everyone would think I was overreacting. She shook her head. "People heard what he said. Don't let anyone gaslight you into believing otherwise." That word, gaslight, settled into my chest like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Before we left, I found Nora. She didn't wait for me to speak. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately. "I was trying to redirect him all weekend. I didn't want to cause drama." "You didn't," I said, "and I meant it. He did." She told me things I hadn't known, or maybe hadn't wanted to know. How Lucas kept asking about her income, her lifestyle, her connections. How uncomfortable she'd been, but didn't want to make a scene at Ethan's wedding. The drive home was 3 hours of suffocating silence. When we finally walked into our apartment, Lucas turned to me, arms crossed. So, what now? Are we really doing this? Over one comment? I looked around at the life we'd built, the shared furniture, the photos on the wall. 5 years reduced to square footage and logistics. You humiliated me in front of everyone I love, I said quietly. He scoffed. You're throwing away 5 years over your pride. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about pride. It's not pride, I said. It's self-respect. I moved out within 48 hours. While I packed, Lucas cycled through emotions like bargaining chips. Anger, tears, promises, threats. I can change, he said. You're making a huge mistake. No one else will put up with your schedule and stress like I did. That last one was the truth, slipped out like a weapon. I stopped packing and looked at him. Even then, he couldn't stop telling me I wasn't enough. I left without slamming the door. The aftermath was loud online. Lucas posted about men who can't handle confident women. Fire emojis. You deserve better, King. Then people who were actually there started commenting. You said that in front of her mom. That wasn't confidence. That was cruelty. The post disappeared within hours, but the screenshots didn't. I stayed offline. I went to therapy. I started naming the patterns I'd ignored, the comparisons, the subtle shame, the way he made me feel small without ever raising his voice. It wasn't one night. It was 5 years of small cuts. And for the first time, I let myself believe that leaving wasn't an overreaction. It was survival. If the breakup itself was an earthquake, the weeks that followed were the aftershocks. Unpredictable, disorienting, and impossible to ignore. Lucas didn't fade quietly out of my life. He expanded. At first, it was messages. Long, carefully worded apologies sent late at night, heavy with regret, but light on responsibility. I didn't mean it like that. You know I was drunk. People are twisting the story. When I didn't respond, the tone shifted. You're being cruel now. You're letting everyone paint me as a villain. 5 years should count for something. It always came back to what he was losing. Mutual friends started reaching out, not to check on me, but to understand both sides. A few suggested I should have handled it privately, that public humiliation was unfortunate, as if it had happened to Lucas rather than because of him. I learned quickly who had actually been listening that night and who just didn't want to be uncomfortable. His parents called once, just once. His mother's voice was polite, strained. Lucas says things got misunderstood. I thanked her for calling and told her I needed space. She didn't argue. Therapy peeled everything open. My therapist asked questions I'd never let myself answer before. When did you start feeling like you had to earn love? When did being chosen stop feeling unconditional? I thought about how often I'd defended Lucas to my own family, how I'd downplayed comments that stung, how I'd absorbed the idea that love meant tolerating discomfort. Meanwhile, Lucas spiraled. He started showing up in places I frequented, not stalking, not overtly, just coincidental. A coffee shop near the hospital, the grocery store on my way home from night shifts. Every encounter left me drained. One evening, he left a voicemail so long it cut off mid-sentence. His voice cracked with anger. You ruined my reputation, he said. People are taking your side like I'm some monster. Do you have any idea what this is doing to me? I blocked his number that night. Through the grapevine, I heard he'd tried contacting Nora, found her on LinkedIn, sent a message about clearing the air, and maybe grabbing coffee to network. She ignored it, but she told me about it later when she was in Portland for work, screenshot in hand. It didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how clearly I saw his motivations now, stripped of affection and excuses. His career took a hit, too. Not officially, not publicly, but word travels. At a company retreat, he'd gotten drunk and gone on a rant about being undervalued, about how no one appreciated his worth. Someone had to escort him back to his hotel. Promotions he'd been expecting didn't materialize. People began to distance themselves, not because I asked them to. I didn't. I stayed quiet. They'd seen it themselves. A friend told me Lucas showed up uninvited to a birthday party, spent the evening complaining about how everyone was fake, then left early when no one engaged. And me? I went the opposite direction. I threw myself into work, not to avoid the pain, but because it grounded me. I was promoted to charge nurse, mentoring new staff, shaping protocols, being trusted in ways Lucas never had. I volunteered with a youth outreach program connected to our ER. Kids in mental health crisis, families overwhelmed, moments that demanded presence, not performance. It was there I met Tessa. She was a trauma counselor, quiet in a way that felt intentional. No posturing, no need to impress. We worked alongside each other for months before friendship even formed. She asked about my job like it mattered. She listened like it mattered. We talked about books. We cooked meals without photographing them. We went on long hikes where no one checked their phone. I wasn't looking for love, but I was learning what respect felt like. And the contrast? It was impossible to ignore. With Lucas, I was always proving my worth. With Tessa, my worth was assumed. That realization changed everything. Healing isn't a straight line. It looks calm from the outside, but inside it dips, sometimes sharply, when you least expect it. For me, the lowest point came months after the breakup, when the noise finally died down. No more messages, no more gossip, no more screenshots circulating in group chats. Just silence. That was when the doubts crept in. Late nights after shifts, I'd sit alone in my small rental, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, and my mind would replay everything I'd walked away from. 5 years, shared routines, familiar laughter, the comfort of knowing someone's rhythms so well you can predict their mood from the way they close a door. I wondered if I'd been too rigid, too proud, too unforgiving. That question, was I too much, has a way of finding women in the quiet. One night after a brutal shift, I broke down in my car, not sobbing, worse. That hollow, shaking kind of crying that feels like something is leaking out of you that you'll never quite get back. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and let myself feel it. The loneliness, the grief, the fear that maybe this was as good as it was ever going to get. At work, I was strong, competent, in control. At home, I felt untethered. That was when Tessa, the trauma counselor I'd been working alongside, noticed. To be clear, Tessa is a man, 34, soft-spoken, grounded in a way that doesn't demand attention. He never pried, never pushed. He just asked one evening as we walked out of the hospital together, "Do you want company or do you want quiet?" I didn't know how to answer that, so I said company. We sat on the steps outside the ER, coffee cooling between us, and for the first time in months, I told the truth without editing it for someone else's comfort. "I left," I said, "but sometimes it still feels like I failed." Tessa didn't rush to contradict me. He nodded slowly. "That makes sense," he said. "Loss doesn't stop hurting just because it was necessary." That sentence cracked something open. Because everyone else, well-meaning as they were, kept telling me how strong I was, how right I was, how obvious it all seemed in hindsight. No one talked about how lonely it feels to choose yourself when you're used to choosing someone else. The darkest moment came not from Lucas, but from my own mind. One night, I dreamed I was back at the vineyard. Same lights, same music, same laugh slipping from Lucas's mouth as he leaned toward someone else. This time, I didn't walk away. I just stood there, smiling, shrinking, disappearing. I woke up gasping, heart racing, sheets tangled around my legs. That morning, I sat on my bed and admitted something terrifying but necessary. Part of me had believed I deserved to be tolerated, not cherished. That belief didn't come from one man. It came from years of minimizing myself to keep the peace. From swallowing discomfort and calling it love. And that realization hurt more than the breakup ever did, because it meant the work wasn't over. It meant leaving was only the first step. The turning point didn't arrive with fireworks or confrontation. It came quietly, through clarity. A few weeks after that sleepless night, my therapist asked me to describe what I missed about Lucas. Not what hurt, not what ended, what I genuinely missed. I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. Not him. I missed the idea of being chosen. The familiarity. The future I'd been clinging to because it was already sketched out, even if the lines were drawn by someone else. That realization landed heavy but clean. Around the same time, Nora visited Portland for work. We met for coffee near the river, rain misting the windows, the city soft and gray outside. She hesitated before speaking, fingers tight around her mug. "I didn't tell you everything before," she said. I looked up. "You don't owe me anything." "I know, but I want you to have the full picture." She told me that the night of the rehearsal dinner wasn't the first time Lucas had crossed a line. Subtle comments, leading questions, compliments that edged too close to testing interest. She'd shut them down politely, assumed it was ego, alcohol, stress. "I never thought he'd say something like that out loud," she said quietly, "especially knowing you were there." Hearing it confirmed, externally, undeniably, did something powerful. It removed the last splinter of doubt. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't bad timing. It wasn't me being sensitive. It was pattern. That same week, I received confirmation of my promotion to charge nurse, official paperwork, a quiet handshake from my supervisor, trust placed squarely in my hands. I walked out of the hospital that night with a strange lightness in my chest. Later, while cooking dinner, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from a number I hadn't blocked yet. Lucas. His voice sounded tired, not angry, not manipulative, just empty. I don't know how to fix this, he said. Everyone sees me differently now. I lost you. I lost everything. For a moment, I felt that old instinct rise, the urge to soothe, to explain, to soften the blow. Then I noticed what he didn't say. He didn't say he understood why I left. He didn't say he was wrong. He didn't say he'd changed. He said he'd lost. I deleted the message. That night, Tessa and I cooked together. Nothing fancy. Pasta, garlic, music low in the background. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You seem lighter." "I am," I replied, and it surprised me how true it felt. Because somewhere between choosing myself, being believed, and being valued without conditions, I'd crossed a threshold. I no longer needed Lucas to understand. I understood. I understood that love doesn't belittle, that respect doesn't need an audience, that being alone is better than being diminished. The decision wasn't dramatic, but it was final. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They unfolded slowly, like dominoes tipping in quiet succession, inevitable, unforced, and entirely of Lucas's own making. I didn't expose him. I didn't confront anyone on his behalf. I didn't tell my side louder than it needed to be told. I simply stepped back. And in that space, the truth did what truth always does when it's left alone long enough. It surfaced. People who had been at the wedding started drawing their own conclusions. They remembered where they were standing, who heard what, the way Lucas laughed instead of apologizing, the way I walked away without causing a scene. My cousin Sarah told me later, what stuck with people wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't do after. No accountability, no humility, no concern for the damage. Friends who had once invited Lucas everywhere began forgetting. Group chats went quiet. Invitations stopped coming. Not out of loyalty to me, at least not consciously, but because something about him no longer sat right. At a dinner party I didn't attend, someone mentioned my promotion. A mutual friend said Lucas stiffened, then launched into a defensive explanation about how nursing wasn't really his thing anyway. The room reportedly went silent. His parents stopped calling. His social media presence shrank. No more motivational posts, no more polished photos, just the occasional vague quote about betrayal or being misunderstood. And then there was the vineyard. Almost a year to the day after Ethan's wedding, he and his wife hosted their baby shower at the same estate. The same string lights, the same rolling hills, the same spot where my relationship had quietly ended. I was nervous about going back. I didn't want the place to reopen wounds. Tessa squeezed my hand. "You don't have to relive it," he said. "You just have to stand in it." The day was warm. Laughter floated through the air. My family was radiant with excitement, my sister-in-law glowing as she opened gifts. Tessa fit in effortlessly, helping set up chairs, talking easily with my mom, listening more than he spoke. I caught my mother watching us more than once, her smile soft, knowing. Halfway through the afternoon, someone whispered, "Is that Lucas?" I turned. He stood at the edge of the parking lot, overdressed, holding a gift bag wrapped too carefully. His posture was tense, like someone bracing for impact. The energy shifted immediately. Conversations faltered. Smiles faded. This was supposed to be a private, joyful day, and suddenly, there he was. I told Tessa to stay with my family and walk toward Lucas before he could reach them. Up close, he looked different. Tired. Thinner. The confidence he once wore so easily now sat awkwardly on his frame. "I just wanted to apologize," he said quickly. "You won't answer my messages." "You don't need to keep apologizing," I replied calmly. "I understood who you were that night." His face crumpled slightly. He insisted he hadn't meant it, that alcohol had twisted his words, that everything had spiraled out of control. "The alcohol didn't create it," I said gently. "It just gave you permission." Tears welled in his eyes. "I lost everything, Catherine," he whispered. "Don't you even care a little?" I thought about that question carefully. "I cared for 5 years," I said. "You didn't. That's why we're here." My sister-in-law appeared beside us and politely asked him to leave. He looked at me once more, searching for rescue. I didn't move. He walked back to his car and drove away. Later, as the sun dipped low and the vineyard glowed gold, I sat with Tessa in the exact spot where everything had fallen apart a year earlier. This time I felt nothing but peace.